Hello, my name is Dick Kasnick. I'm the lazy gardener. I love to eat fresh tomatoes, peppers, have mint or oregano, basil, all kinds of vegetables and herbs in my garden. But I don't like to dig in the dirt. And so from my greenhouse experiences, I decided to put in a container garden on my back patio. Well, first it started with the construction of the patio, and then I had to get the containers. I soon found that the containers were too small and I had to keep moving up. So I'm going to show you the lazy gardener's way to gigantic plants and lots of produce for a whole summer. The first thing that you should take into consideration is which direction does your garden face? My garden faces to the east. So that means that I have morning sun and I get lots of sunlight for my plants for the development of the fruit, development of the flowers, and in the afternoon when it gets really hot, that's when things cool off in my garden. Let's go over first the kinds of plants that I have. At the very front here we have peppers, and we have a nice yellow pepper that's just about ready to pick right up at the front. Then we have yellow squash and zucchini. And no garden would be complete without tomato plants. Now these tomato plants are over 8 feet high, and I'm going to show you a quick and easy way to make your plants just as big and just as fruitful as mine. I also like to grow herbs, so we have lemon balm in the front here, and then we have some parsley, and I plant them in the same container. A little basil in the back. Now, I started with several kinds of basil, but the basil is pretty well played out because of the heat. And then we have mint over here, and there's nothing better than a mint julep or mint jelly. And no garden would be complete without rosemary. So we got a nice little rosemary plant growing there. Now the tomatoes are the big deal here. And you can see my tomato plant. There's actually multiple plants in that container, and that container is a garbage can. I'll get to the specifics of how I actually grow that in just a minute. On the far side of the garden is a cherry tomato plant, and I call this a cherry tomato plant gone wild. This started off when I bought this plant. This started off as a little plant about 6 inches high. Now, even though some of the branches have fallen, you can see that I have a huge, bountiful fruiting crop. I pick tomatoes every other day. And you can see how many are on that plant and how ripe they are. Let's talk about the plants. I've got the rosemary in this little clay pot. And I like clay pots because it helps keep the plant cool. But when I first started tomato gardening on the patio, I outgrew those clay pots very quickly. And then I moved up to a pot about this size, which is an 18-inch pot. And even that pot was quickly outgrown. Now on my big tomato plants, I use a 32-gallon garbage can. I went and bought new garbage cans, put holes in the bottom, and then put a infrared barrier on the can to keep the roots cool. If you let your roots get too hot, your roots are not going to grow to the sufficient degree to support that plant. Let's do a close-up. And show you how many tomatoes actually grow in this plant. It's important when you look for your tomatoes that you go way into the plant and look on the inside, because that's where a lot of the tomatoes are going to ripen up at the early part of the season. An example is there's one right up in there in the midst of all the leaves foliage. Last year when I grew my tomatoes in the same can, the tomatoes got to be 12 feet wide. So this year, to control that, I suckered the tomatoes and I also pulled them up with string and cloth. There's another little. Here's another example of how the tomatoes grow, ripen up inside the plant. So you've always got to be on the alert to find the ones you don't want them to over ripen and fall off. These little guys here eat leaves, but as long as they don't severely damage my plant, I don't worry about them too much. Now you might wonder what that little white spot is on the leaf. That's the egg from a parasitic wasp that comes off of a hornworm that attacks my tomato plants. I like to see those guys because they will hatch into a wasp and they will then lay more eggs on those hornworms and kill the hornworm and continue that cycle of natural predation to keep the bugs off of my tomato plant. We've already pulled from this plant probably 25 or 30 pounds. Probably got a hornworm ate that, so we're just going to throw that part out. Kind of a bug ate a hole in that one too. Well, there's what we picked for about 2 days pickings worth. Well worth the effort of putting in. Patio garden. Call me a lazy gardener. Well, I've zeroed the scale out so that it takes out the weight of the bowl. And here we've picked 2.5 pounds of beautiful, tasty, homegrown tomatoes, and they've never had a bit of anything on them that will be bad for you. No pesticides, no fungicides. Everything is natural. I hope you like The Lazy Gardener. I hope to see you again.